You know, when you picture a solar farm, you probably imagine this vast, shimmering sea of panels baking in a hot, dry desert, right? But what if the real future of solar isn't on land at all? Today, we're going to dive into the wild and pretty amazing world of offshore solar power.
So the solar revolution is absolutely here, which is great. But let's be real, it comes with a huge practical problem. Solar farms take up a massive amount of space. And land? Well, that's a finite resource, and it's leading to some serious conflicts over how we use it. So, where are we going to put all these panels?
Well, how about we look to the ocean? 50%. Think about that number for a second. That's the slice of the entire world's population that lives within about 100 kilometers of a coast. And that one fact puts the problem of land scarcity right next to its most obvious and, frankly, its most enormous solution.
Yeah, this whole land use issue is a major hurdle if we want to scale up solar energy in a big way. It's forcing scientists and engineers to get really creative and start looking for completely new frontiers.
And that new frontier, you guessed it, it's the ocean. The solution is pretty ambitious, but it makes a lot of sense. If we're running out of room on land, let's just take our solar panels out to sea. And believe it or not, this is happening right now. The main tech behind all this is called floating photovoltaics, or FPV for short. Now, photovoltaics is just a fancy way of saying you're turning sunlight straight into electricity. So FPV is exactly what it sounds like, solar power systems built specifically to float. And while they got their start on calmer places like lakes, the real prize, the ultimate goal, is conquering the open ocean.
So here's the basic idea of how it works. You've got your solar panels sitting on these floating structures to keep them buoyant, and then those are tied down with mooring lines that are anchored right to the seabed. Simple, right? Well, kinda. The devil is always in the details, especially when you're dealing with the raw power of the ocean.
You know, this isn't just about saving space either. Putting solar panels out on the water comes with some fantastic bonus features. For one, the water acts as a natural coolant, which actually makes the panels more efficient. You can also combine them with other industries like fish farming, and bonus, there's way less dust out at sea to gunk them up.
So the big question is, how do you actually build a solar farm that can survive the rough and tumble of the sea? Well, engineers have come up with four main approaches, and you can kind of think of them in two groups. A few designs that try to fight the waves, and one really cool one that works with them. Let's break them down. First up, we've got the most straightforward design of them all, fixed pile-based systems. The easiest way to think about it is like building a permanent pier, but instead of a boardwalk on top for people to walk on, you're installing a huge platform for solar panels.
The concept is pretty simple. You literally drive these big stationary columns deep into the seabed to create a super stable foundation. It's perfect for places like shallow coastal areas or mudflats. The huge plus side is that it's incredibly tough and stable against wind and waves. The downside? It costs a lot up front, and it's just not going to work for deep water.
Okay, design number 2 is where things really start to float, but it has a big challenge. It has to deal with the ocean's constant motion. In other words, the system has to be totally wave-proof.
So how do you do that? You use something called a breakwater. You've got a couple of options here. On the one hand, a floating breakwater basically acts like a big shield, just absorbing the energy from the waves. Or you can use a pile-permeable breakwater, which has this clever design that breaks up the waves and scatters their force before they can slam into the solar panels.
All right, next up, we have an even beefier approach, floating platform systems. With this design, instead of having the panels floating right on the surface, you install them on these huge elevated platforms that actually ride above most of the waves.
And here's a great example of that in action. This is the Solar Sea platform. See that strong, almost web-like structure underneath? That's what lifts the panels and all the important electronics safely up and away from the direct action of the waves.
Pretty smart. Now, this platform design has some major advantages. Not only does it keep all the sensitive electronics safe, but it's also super modular, which means you can link them together to create absolutely massive solar farms. And you can even integrate them with other offshore stuff, creating these powerful, all-in-one clean energy hubs.
And now for what I think is the most futuristic design. The one that doesn't fight the waves, but actually works with them. The big idea here is, what if, instead of trying to resist the ocean, you just went with the flow? That's the whole concept behind floating thin-film PV.
The secret sauce is this flexible membrane. It's basically like a high-tech lily pad that just rides the waves, which dramatically reduces the stress on the whole system. And get this, the direct contact with the water provides amazing cooling, which can boost the power output by up to 10%. That is a huge gain.
Okay, so all of these designs are pretty brilliant on paper, right? But now comes the ultimate test. They have to survive the incredibly harsh reality of the open ocean. And trust me, it is a hostile environment for any piece of technology.
And man, what a gauntlet it is. You've got this constant, corrosive salt fog that just wants to eat away at everything. You've got biofouling, which is just a nice word for algae and barnacles deciding your solar panels are their new home. You've got corrosive bird droppings, lightning strikes, and of course the constant threat of extreme weather.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem, not at all. This quote really brings it home. A system in Japan was caught in 190 km/h winds from a typhoon. Just try to imagine that. Those are the kinds of immense forces these engineers have to design for. It's an absolutely extraordinary challenge.
But here's the amazing part. Despite all those challenges, the industry isn't just surviving out there, it's scaling up. And I mean scaling up big time. Let's take a look at what the future holds, because the numbers, they're getting seriously big.
That is not a typo. 11.25 gigawatts. That's the planned capacity for new offshore projects just in China. This just goes to show you that offshore solar is moving way beyond small-scale experiments and becoming a true industrial-scale reality.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, first, it's clear that offshore solar is officially leveling up, moving from a niche experiment to a full-on mega project. Second, it offers a really powerful way to bring huge amounts of clean energy right to the coastal areas where, remember, half the world lives. And finally, it really does represent a vast new frontier for renewable energy. Which leaves us with one final fascinating question to think about. We've harnessed the land, the wind, and the sun in the sky for energy. As we look to the future, could our vast, powerful oceans become our biggest power plants of all? It feels like the journey is just beginning.